Welcome back to the channel. If you're heading to Riyadh this year and you've just bought your first camera or you're thinking about it, this video is for you. Today I want to talk properly about getting started with airshow photography, not in a complicated technical way, just real advice and what you actually need, what you don't, and how to make the most of whatever budget that you have to work with. We'll cover beginner cameras that generally work for airshows, budget-friendly lens options, and when a two-body setup makes sense, and how to approach the static part. This is going to be part one of a three-part series building up to Riyadh, and this is going to be filmed over this weekend. And if you're a parent looking at buying a setup for your son and daughter who've just discovered aviation photography, stick around. This will generally save you a lot of money. Now, I shoot Nikon, so I'll be using Nikon examples, but everything I'm going to talk about will apply to any brand of camera that you will look at buying. Originally, I wanted to film part of this at RF Lakenheath, but with everything going on recently, it's understandably busy. So we're starting at home. Part 3 will be at Duxford, where we'll focus properly on the static aircraft elements. Right, let's start with the cameras. If you're just starting out, you don't need the newest camera on the market. You really don't. So some of the best learning cameras for airshows are actually old DSLR bodies. They're affordable, reliable, and they still are very capable cameras. So the two ranges I always mention are D3000 series and the D7000 series. So the D7000 range is suited better for the flying displays because you get stronger autofocuses and better performance overall, and the buffers are better. But both can absolutely get you started in the aviation world. These cameras are older now, which works in your favour. You can pick them up second hand for around £100 to £350 depending on condition. If you can stretch your budget slightly further, I would personally recommend the Nikon D7200. I used to use that camera for Riyadh for many years and it has served me well. It has a strong autofocus system, a larger buffer, faster processing, performance, and solid performance for, say, tracking the fast jets and aircraft moving. So this is the 7100, and the ergonomics and the look is exactly the same as the 7200, which is the perfect example why I am showing this in this video. The 7100 is still great, but the 7200 just gives you a bit more breathing space and room when it comes to airshow action, as explained earlier. But here's something important. Just don't get obsessed with specs. The biggest improvement in my photography didn't come from upgrading cameras. They come from learning how to get used to what you actually have in your hands. This is your tool, so just really learn it before you upgrade. So now we're going to realistically talk about budget. Let's say you've got a £500 budget in total, and that is absolutely doable here because, for example, a Nikon D7100 can be found for around £145 to £300 depending on condition. So that actually leaves room for a decent telephoto lens. Now, you can pair this with a older 70 to 300mm lens, either from a Nikon, Tamron or Sigma, and you've got a very capable airshow setup. But one important thing is though, not all older lenses have built-in autofocus motors. If you pair the wrong lens with something like the 3300 for example, you could lose the autofocus completely, and manual focusing on fast jets is not fun when you're new. So please double check when purchasing, especially if you're coming from a camera shop. Just give them a call and ask. And just remember this, you don't need thousands of pounds to start aviation photography. You just need to be realistic with your expectations and have time to practice. This is what I done. all those years ago before I started building up to the camera bodies that I have. So now we're going to talk about, is two bodies worth it? Now with me I have two bodies here, and I'm going to explain more in detail about these two bodies and the reasons why. Now if your budget allows you for two bodies, things can get a lot more easier. Personally, I like having two bodies. So one camera setup is purely for flying, and one camera setup is purely for the static and wider shots. So for example, 7000 range paired with a 7300mm lens for flying, pairing it with a 3300 with a wider lens for static aircraft, even taxi shots, the cockpit details and formation like passes and fly pass. This is your biggest advantage. You're not missing like top side passes because you're changing your lenses around to get that shot that you really want. You're reducing the risk of dust on your sensor, and this can be a right pain when it comes to editing. And is it really essential? No, but it's more convenient. Plenty of photographers still use one camera and one lens and still get incredible results. But this just comes down to what feels more comfortable for you. So for beginners, I usually recommend lenses like the Nikon 70-300 or the Nikon 55-300 to give you more reach, the Sigma or Tamron 70-300mm lenses, or even a Nikon 18-200mm. You just want that flexibility when it comes to lens choice. The reason why 70-300 is popular is simple, because it's practical. On a crop sensor body, 300mm gives you enough reach for most displays, most passes, without being huge or expensive when you compare it to say like a 200-500mm lens. And if you go bigger, like the 200mm to 500mm, you'll notice that the extra reach, but you also notice the extra weight by the end of the day, and they are heavy lenses. And there's always been a fine balance between reach, height and budget. You don't need the biggest lens when it comes to air shows. You still get great shots. You'll just need to understand how to use it and what you're going to be able to photograph with it. And that's why I say you don't need to go for high jets at 5,000 feet in the air doing, a full display. So if you're completely new, just start simple. Shoot in JPEG and you'll learn how to use your camera. Start in auto mode and just get comfortable with the camera, the lens, how it feels, how it balances in your hand. Because when you're panning and stuff, just get used to all the settings. And then move on to different options like the shutter priority or aperture priority. But for me, I like to use manual because you've got full control over the camera, but that takes time. And especially with the D7200 or 100, because when you're shooting air shows, I like to have full control. So in manual, you've got aperture and shutter speed, and the shutter speed's on the back here, and aperture is on the front. And you can also change your ISO, but you don't generally change that much unless it starts to get a bit more dark with clouds and even rain perhaps. So when you're shooting, you can really change the aperture, quite quickly, or the shutter speed. So especially for like arrivals and departures, you might have a typhoon or a tornado taking off, and then the next one could be a Hercules or an A400. So you want to really change settings quite quickly. So if you've got a tornado, you want to be having, about over 1 in 1,000th of a second. But to capture prop blur, you want to really lower your shutter speed down to say 1 in 125. But then you're going to have to do that quite quickly. So with these cameras, you use the back button to go down to the slower shutter speed or higher on the shutter speed, and same with the aperture. And you can really control your camera more efficiently compared to say a 3300 where you've only got the one dial at the back, where you have to press If you can see there, you have to press this button here and then go up or down, which is still quite convenient, but having the one on the front, it just makes it so much easier. So that's just my personal opinion and advice when it comes to choosing what camera you really need to use for air shows. For air shows, you need a faster shutter speed for jets and a slower shutter speed for props to get the aircraft proper, and I just mentioned. Now, adjusting the ISO as light changes. So the biggest skill at an air show isn't the expensive gear, it's smooth tracking. So practice following the aircraft through the viewfinder, but nice and calmly and steadily move your body around, and I will explain this when we go to RFA and Duxford in better detail. If you're going to practice before RIAT, just go to sort of like your local airport or aviation museums, and this is what I'm going to show you at Duxford because that's a great place to learn. And even like track the airliners overhead on a nice clear day. Just get used to the settings and actually just practice with your camera. Even go to like a free seaside air show or any other air shows just before RIAT, because you'll get to deal with changing light and awkward like sun sort of direction that could be right in front of you. By the time RIAT arrives, you'll feel more confident in your camera and yourself, and you'll be able to enjoy the air show a lot more. What to expect? At first, you'll miss shots. Everyone does. I did, and I remember my dad doing it. It was quite funny. I was comparing both pictures. You'll get soft focuses, clipped wings, and you'll underexpose some pictures. But all this is brilliant learning curves, and it's all normal. And then what you'll do is you'll go back through your images and learn where you went wrong and how to practice and how to sort of really correct the type of shots that you want to do. That's all normal. And then slowly something clicks. You'll start anticipating the passes, the angles the planes fly at, when you'll need that slower shutter speed or when you need that faster one, and then you can sort of like that just track a lot more smoother. So you'll start anticipating more of the passes of the aircraft and where they're going to be doing certain display routines, and you also like frame your images a lot better and smoother. And one day you'll look back at your camera and think, that's the shot that I've been after. So airshow photography takes time. It is incredibly rewarding, but it just takes that patience, and that's just take that away from this video. Just please be patient with your airshow photography. If you've made it this far, I'd like to say thank you, and I hope it's made things a lot more clearer, especially if you're heading to RIAT for the first time with your camera. There's more to come in this series as we'll build up to the Royal International Air Tattoo, including practice filming, airfields, and a full static art guide, which I'll go through at Duxford. If that sounds useful, please subscribe and stick around, and I'll see you in part 2.